Welcome to HR on the Rocks, a podcast for professionals that takes you behind the closed door.
All right, here we are yet again, another podcast. Pretty excited about this one. In previous podcasts, we had talked, Justin and I really kind of went down the path of like what has changed in recruiting in the past decade. But more broadly, I think this time we want to tackle how technology has changed HR as a general statement, right? So HR includes recruiting, but is not limited to recruiting. So anyway, cheers, y'all. Welcome to yet another episode. I think Melanie has a full-on beer in her mug. Got a little bourbon here.
That is no doubt a full glass of sassafras.
This is a mystery drink.
Mystery drink. Nice. Okay. Well, cheers, y'all. No tie for me today, and am supporting the Army team. Like right now, they're killing it in football. So at any rate, so really my first question, Melanie, will go to you. And it's pretty specific, but obviously very broad too. I would imagine that your answer will be specific to one area, but again, like as you look at technology and you understand the impact that it's made in the landscape of HR as a whole, like what very specifically right now? So like we're not talking a decade ago, we're not talking 5 years ago. Like right now, what are you seeing as far as things that it's changing when it comes to HR?
So for me, I'd say that technology has changed the way that most companies, if not almost all companies, I'll just say most companies, onboard new hires. Some utilize it a little more than others, but that's definitely something when I think back to some of my first jobs and the way, you come in on your first day and you have actual paper that you fill out, they print, you have a pin versus what it looks like today, which is kind of a mix. You have some companies that use like the digital onboarding platforms and they streamline, that integration of getting new hires in. They offer like different kinds of self-service options to complete that paperwork, and as well as new hire training, as well as maybe getting a flavor for the company culture if you're able to.
Videos, things like that.
And, I think that has the potential to enhance the onboarding experience, just the way I guess technology has the ability to enhance, most HR functions, recruiting, but, only when it's done right, or usually if it's done right, which in my opinion is at least right now a mix of that technology, like the digital mixed with in-person, even if the in-person is like a remote, video kind of situation or on the phone when new hires are completing their onboarding. And I think there's also a need to find a balance in utilizing automation and AI.
Yeah, for sure.
Like in balancing out, and maybe even more so with recruiting in some ways, but like finding a balance there with that need for human interaction, human intuition, and like empathy when it comes to onboarding a new hire or evaluating a candidate. And technology can only go so far, at least so far it can only go so far. Like maybe there's something in the future where there's some self-awareness and
what I was going to ask you too, do we actually need to like some of it on that kind of process? Do we need to, a lot of people aren't tech savvy, and we know how we need to like dumb it down too, right?
Yeah.
And I think
Who might we be talking about there, Justin?
Justin has some self-awareness.
And I think we actually need to, we're talking about me and not companies we work for.
That's right. Okay. That's right.
Okay. That's true, because I think I've asked my wife to apply for me the last few places because you want me to upload what?
Yeah, you didn't want to upload the resume.
You want me to do what?
Right.
But as you say that, there is I understand where I come from, but truthfully, we know in HR, recruiting side, and on your side, Melanie, as well as on onboarding, how many times have we sat there and like gone through a piece by piece process of what you need to do? And you know what? At the end of the day, some people don't get it right. And some of that actually has to do with clients and companies and their uploading process and, their hiring process. And they don't make it, think it's streamlined.
That they're using.
You think it's streamlined, but it's not.
Yeah. And and there's also kind of room in there for, like, it's great to use digital platforms or automation, but like also be open to getting feedback and then refining the process and working out any kinks. And like, that's a continuous thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, to Justin's point, I know that I've been on like the phone, and it's like pretty much all digital experience with onboarding, but I'm on the phone with the handful of people that just something doesn't click. And I'm like, okay, now you click the big red next button. And now you click, and it's like you're on the phone for, I mean, I've been on the phone for 2 hours trying to fill out a W-4 form. And,
Yeah, I know. The $50 Amazon gift card I gave you just to deal with that one, the person we're talking about,
yeah.
that I didn't want to do it,
Jane
actually turned into $12.50 an hour gift card as opposed to like what I was trying to give you. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's
So, and I
amazing.
mean, like you also like you have to take into account that not everybody has like technology is something that most people use these days. But not everybody does. Not everyone. It's not easy for everyone, and you can sometimes make for some people that you're starting at a new company and you can only make a first impression once, and you don't want that impression to be like they're frustrated the company because of something like a W-4 or like putting your address in or giving your emergency contacts, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, electing benefits, right?
Yeah,
It
Same
should
there's
thing.
be
no
basic. It should be
right.
easy,
It's
transitional.
Well,
don't make it negative.
and yeah, to that end, I think one of the most interesting things about the whole conversation anyway is the fact that like you look back a couple of decades ago and none of this stuff even existed. Like it wasn't even a thought. It was a process that was on paper or in person. There wasn't anything technological about it at all. And so, some people have adapted to that and they're okay with it and comfortable with it. Others haven't. And that's okay too. Like it's one of those things where, at some point, folks have got to, be able to figure it out, on a basic level. And I think, Melanie, you made an excellent point in that, like, you want to keep the human aspect in human resources and not just go wild with technology, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you can certainly it like I don't think there's any doubt that with onboarding specifically, when you're using technology to make that easier, the administrative burden is lessened, but the experience of the candidate or the new hire potentially is decreased or greatly decreased, depending on how you use it. So yeah,
I just
Yep.
want pen and paper.
that's
Well, I mean, you think
sure.
about it, you think about it, and Justin, I mean, it's funny you say it that way, but like there are people that I would venture to say right now, and I'm certain actually that this happens because I've been in a company where this did happen. They might not even talk to anybody aside from like their actual new manager for the first
Yes,
2 to 5 days of their employment.
Yeah.
Like
which
they're
is
busy like doing all the online stuff and watching the videos and doing the training and all that fun stuff.
And that's one of the worst things you can do as
Right.
for a new. And we'll get into that. That's a whole nother, because that's
That's a whole
that's
different podcast. Yeah.
that's a lecture lesson of what you're supposed to do, and alienating your employees is one of them. But you're also doing that in the new hire process when you bring them on board, and just
Yeah.
like you were talking about, Melanie, because you can sit there and stuck, and then you're, as you said, Jake, she is very right, human and human resources. But if you get stuck there and you're on an island and that's all you're dealing with, and
Yep.
that's your first impression of human resources, where do you think it never goes when you're just, that's their first impression of your company?
Yeah, for sure. Melanie, anything else before we jump to Justin? Anything else you want to add on that?
No, I think that's pretty much it for me.
Okay. And feel free to jump in and interrupt Justin as much as we interrupted you,
I will be.
Mr.
What are we
Sassafras.
interrupting me on? I can't wait.
It's actually one of my favorite kid jokes. I'm going to tell it just for the sake of this podcast. It's a knock knock joke. So Justin, knock knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting cow.
Moo.
Yeah.
It's the greatest kid joke ever. Anyway, so Justin, hopefully I bought you a little time to think about your response here. But again, the question is specifically like right now, how is technology impacting? And hey, impact, there's one tick mark for this episode. So how is it
That's
impacting? Yep, there it
That's
is.
3.
The landscape as far as like HR as a whole is concerned. And I think I know where you'll go with that specific to recruiting, but go ahead.
Actually, it's really impacted now, especially we were talking about AI and all that sassafras. That's 3 times now too, Melanie. That's 3
Oh.
times.
It's like Super Troopers where they try to see how many times they can say meow. How's it going,
Exactly. Behind the scenes on our podcast, we'll We'll have a first episode of fun. This is going to be one of them, because
the outtakes.
A lot of it, the weird part is some of the AI driven that we can actually have now is I don't like it, actually. I'm going to be the one who's way on the opposite side, who doesn't like, people can sit there and say what they've done now and speak to it on a recruiting side on their resume and make up a whole bunch of stuff, but that's not, and then they're uploading it, and then you're talking to them, and you're trying to do it. Well, you say you have this and this, and they can't actually real world talk about it when we're doing a face-to-face, or we're doing a Zoom, or we're doing a phone conversation. They're making a fake resume. I understand people made fake stuff before, right? I mean, we've all, well, maybe not all of us, but especially the two people on this call.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Maybe Justin has stretched the truth a little on the rest,
but the two of you, no, of course. I mean, most people have, right? I mean, yeah, I've recruited on ASP.net, but yet you really only had one job search and you only looked for one candidate, but yet you recruited on it. I mean, that's just...
And it's on the resume, right?
It's on the resume because you did it one time. You found one person who wasn't even, they just had ASP and it meant they were a veterinarian and they looked after ass. That's what they did. But it is
all different. That's all a different
real life
thing.
Experience.
This sounds real.
No. But thank you, Melanie. Thank you. I did not
He's a
put
better
the
recruiter
dot
than
in
that.
Yes, some days. So but see, that's where it goes back into putting the human, like you were talking about. But that gets into the human nature of how you actually need to actually do that and not sit there and be doing, you go into your own research, make it about you. And I think we've lost a little.
Yeah.
No, it's a fair point. I mean, the access to information and, understanding exactly what a job entails now, and then being able to speak to that with, maybe something that's accurate, maybe not, is a little bit, it's easier to do that now. It's easier to kind of fake it, if you will. I mean, and then AI, take that a step further. At a certain point, our images and our voices, the fact that we have these podcasts out there for the world, AI will be able to rip off all of that stuff and essentially imitate us. You see it with, for me as a Green Bay Packer fan, I see these Aaron Rodgers things all the time and they're hilarious, but it's completely fake. And if someone's gullible enough, they'll believe that there's Aaron talking poorly about his coach and his team and everything else. So anyway, I guess I'll turn the question back on myself. And I'm going to I have advice for companies that are out there that are struggling with, this very thing, because technology it's changing by the moment at this point. And especially with the things that you can utilize as a recruiter or as an HRIS system, an ERP, right? An enterprise resource planner. Those technologies are evolving minute to minute now, which is just completely wild considering that, again, just a decade ago, we were talking about file cabinets and how that stuff worked, right? So I moved to Aledo unwittingly. And Justin, I know I've talked to you about this before, but I didn't realize what a big football town Aledo was. So growing up, having played football myself, I certainly enjoy the game, love the game, but I actually didn't want my son to play. We moved to Aledo for the schools, not for the 12 state titles that we've had as a state record. So not only
had nothing to do with that.
I had nothing to do with that. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
but
nothing.
It's kind of amazing that, you have this state that takes its football seriously. And within that state, I just so happened to plant myself in this town that takes football that seriously. And so AJ decides he wants to play. I'm against it. But when he finally signs up, they say, hey, we don't have enough coaches. I raise my hand to coach and I go through the draft process. There's a tryout, get a sense of who the kids are, and then you go and sit in a draft room and you draft these kids. And first of all, it's fascinating. That's a whole different podcast too. But I think the biggest thing that I took away from that was to use a football euphemism, I really fumbled the ball when it came to that process, because I know, right? But I did in the sense that I got some really great skill kids up front, and I was really excited about the skill kids that I got. And then I'm like, okay, it's time to start drafting linemen. And when I looked up to draft linemen, they were all off the board already. I'm like, oh, I've made a colossal error here. I'm going to have a bunch of small kids to be linemen at this point. But it was what it was. We made a decent season out of it. We made it to the playoffs and had fun. But I was forced into a position because of my knuckleheadedness, and I never made that mistake again, but to have to use what I've got. And so with technology, and to tie that into HR specifically, a lot of companies out there already have a system. So like, let's say you're a small company and you're on Google Workspace and you're utilizing Google. Well, you can use Google, like you can use worksheets and a variety of different other automations that either plug right into it or are built into Google itself to basically be your CRM, your customer relationship manager. And I mean, you can set up meetings, you can do all these things that are essentially, you know, other systems can take care of for you as well, but it's already integrated in what you have. Right. So like if we started with Google as a Google Suite user at Impact, and then we went out and bought, you know, some fancy software that was a Microsoft product, like shame on us. Right. And not shame on us in the sense that it's probably a great product and it probably does a lot of things. But like, let's use a big example. So like, let's say a company has an ERP and their finance department is using Oracle software, but then some recruiter or some HR leader comes in and says, you know what, I really like, as an HRIS system, a human resources information system, I really want to use Ultimate Software. And so they bolt on Ultimate Software to Oracle. And it's like, these two things are completely different products. Yes, there's an integration because they all have to integrate with each other at this point. It's kind of it's a no-brainer for them to be able to sell, you know, pieces and parts of their product as opposed to like the whole package. But the reality is, like, you create headaches for yourself, and not just like a little small bump of a headache. We're talking like colossal mountains.
Because you're trying to merge.
Yeah, you're trying to put, so it's like, it's actually, if you ever watched Apollo 13, that scene where like they have to do the air filter and they've got to put a square peg literally into a round hole. It's like,
How are we
okay,
going to do it? Yeah.
how are you going to do it? And so that's what companies are doing when they do these integrations. And so you're sitting there, you're talking to an IT guy, and you're creating these headaches for yourself. And if and when that IT guy, heaven forbid, leaves your business and goes to a competitor, the next guy may or may not even understand the code that they use to do some of the integration work.
Or they're coming in and switching everything.
Yeah.
They're switching an entire system. I mean, these are massive undertakings that take up a ton of time. And when it's all said and done with, so I am a firm believer, and so let's take a big step back now and talk about impact and the consulting aspect of our business. As we go in and we consult with businesses, one of the first things that I look at is the technology package that they're utilizing. And if they've got technology all over the place, I'm like, okay, what is your core system? And let's utilize everything that core system is able to do for you. Because if you're constantly in this suite of products, why are you going outside of it to do something else and not just utilizing what's there? Now, what's there may not be as sophisticated. So like Oracle versus Ultimate Software, opinion wise, people may feel like it's easier to use Ultimate, but the reality is, like, they're performing the same function.
And Jake, to your point, we actually need what do you want? What do you want your systems to do for you?
Yeah, you, the customer.
And I figured that is left out so many times.
Yeah.
That piece is never, I want this, I want that, because you're listening to so many, what actually is it that you want? What do you want to happen? And that's why you get so many different pieces. I want this piece, I need this, when they don't look at the whole suite of things that actually could make things happen.
Yeah. Well, and then some of that turns into like intercompany politics or power struggles where you have, CHRO and the CFO, like they don't agree, and the CFO is like, well, I'm doing this, so forget you guys, you don't get any input. And now the CHRO is like, well, fine, I'm doing this. And so, now it becomes a territorial or a political game that, software is now just another piece of that puzzle for them. But again, as a consultant, specifically within the HR realm, I think the biggest piece of advice I could have, and it's just like my football team, is like, you've got to figure out how to use what you got and utilize that to the best of your ability. And, at the end of the day, it usually works out pretty well when you do. My team made it to the playoffs. We were okay. Was it the perfect season that everyone expects out of Alito? No, it wasn't. But that's okay. Right? And the kids all learned how to play the game. Didn't scare anyone off from the game. And the same is true when it comes to HR and HR systems. Use what you've got. Make sure that you put yourself in a position that you're not having to spend wasting all this time on either troubleshooting the system or training people up on the system, because it's so complicated and complex to use that you just can't. And so I could go on and on. I think I'm going to stop there because this is probably another episode to
Yeah, I was
dive a
saying, do
little
we have
deeper.
more time for this? Because I've got a whole lot more to say.
Yeah. No. So
Okay.
it's probably a good time to pause. Let's press the pause button,
Okay.
and we'll bring folks back in to this same conversation on the next episode. But anyway, so this one was a fun one for me. This is, I think, one that I recommended right out of the outset when we were talking about building out all of our content, just because it is so critical for companies to get it right. So I guess what I'm saying to you two is thanks for humoring me on this one. Obviously, I get a little passionate about it, so cheers.
And guess what? You got a whole nother episode for you, and we'll do it. We'll see you. Guess what? We'll see you next week just for
That's
this
right.
one.
Tune in. Thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of the day and go make an impact.